When you think about the ultimate picture of Christmas tradition, particularly in the UK, what's that one image that really springs to mind?
Oh, for me, it has to be that scene from A Christmas Carol.
From the Cratchit family dinner.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The moment Mrs. Cratchit brings in the pudding, Dickens describes it as a speckled cannonball, so hard and firm, blazing.
Blazing and half a quartern of ignited brandy.
Yes,
Yeah.
it is the definitive, dramatic centerpiece of holiday food legend.
And that blazing, dense cannonball is exactly what we are plunging into today. This deep dive is all about the complex history, the incredible labor, and the genuinely surprising science behind plum pudding.
Or, as many people just call it, Christmas pudding.
Right.
And we've looked at a huge range of sources for this, everything from, Regency recipes in the 1820s to modern adaptations, and even some really wonderful family stories that show just how much commitment this thing requires.
So our mission today is to synthesize all of this for you. We're going to uncover the essential ingredients, the shocking timeline, and maybe the biggest question of all,
Why it's called plum pudding.
when there are absolutely no plums in it. Okay, let's unpack this. We have to start with a name. We just have to. Because if you look at an ingredient list, you see raisins, currants, maybe prunes, but no plums.
Right. And it's a totally understandable confusion. We saw one comment from a first-time baker that just said, "I am shocked as there are no plums in this recipe."
And what's the answer?
The answer is wonderfully historical. Back in the 17th, 18th centuries, the word plum was just a kind of a blanket term for any dried fruit.
Any dried fruit, like raisins.
Exactly. Raisins, currants, that sort of thing. It was just a common word for it.
So it's an old name that just stuck.
It stuck. And I think if we connect this to the bigger picture, the name also hints at the dessert's really ancient and very humble beginnings.
Humble how?
Well, this wasn't always a sweet celebratory cake. Originally, Christmas pudding was savory.
Wait, savory? You mean like a meat pudding?
A meaty cannonball, yes. It was a way to preserve leftover meat after the autumn slaughter, steamed in a cloth for preservation. Sort of a proto-haggis.
Wow.
It only became the sweet, rich dessert we know in the Victorian era, when things like sugar and spices and all that imported dried fruit became affordable enough to, dump into the mix.
And that cooking method, the steaming, is key. Those old 1827 recipes, they talk about boiling it in a tight cloth.
Which is what gives it that speckled cannonball shape Dickens described.
It's also why it's called a pudding in the first place, right? Because in the U.S., pudding is something totally different.
Absolutely. In America, pudding is a creamy, sort of custard-like dessert. But in the UK, a pudding is really a method. It's something steamed or boiled in a cloth or a basin.
Like a clootie dumpling in Scotland.
A perfect example.
Yeah.
It's a close cousin to Christmas pudding, simmered in a cloth, a clootie, for hours and hours.
And that long, slow, wet cooking method is what makes the texture so unique.
It's dense, of course, but it shouldn't be heavy. Which brings us to the ingredients.
Here's where it gets really interesting. We have to talk about the fat, because this is the one ingredient that seems to separate a good pudding from a greasy rock.
And traditionally that means one thing and one thing only.
Suet.
Suet. And we're not just talking about any fat. It's specifically the hard, raw fat from around the kidneys of a cow or a sheep.
Which I imagine is not something you just pick up at the local supermarket.
No. We saw anecdotes about people having to call up very specific old-school butchers to get the real thing.
So why go through all that trouble? Why not just use butter?
It comes down to pure food science. Suet has a much, much higher melting point than butter.
Okay.
So think about it. The pudding steams for hours. If you use butter, it would melt almost immediately, making the whole thing heavy and oily before it has a chance to cook.
But the suet doesn't melt right away.
Exactly. The suet acts as a placeholder. It stays solid while the breadcrumbs and flour set around it. Only then, once the structure is formed, does it finally melt.
And leaves behind
thousands of tiny little air pockets.
Oh, that's it. That's the secret to the texture. It's what makes it feel light, even though it's so dense.
That's the magic of it. It's why those old recipes are so insistent. And, it's interesting. The whole conversation around these traditional fats is changing.
How so?
Well, the sources distinguish between, say, traditionally rendered lard and the hydrogenated stuff you get in a block at the store, which is often full of trans fats. So purists are really careful.
So beyond the fat, you have the filler, which is, surprisingly, breadcrumbs.
A lot of breadcrumbs.
Wow.
3 or 4 cups of soft, fresh breadcrumbs.
Which sounds like it's just there to bulk it out to make it cheaper.
It probably started that way, but now it's essential for the texture. They act like a sponge, holding all the moisture and flavor and helping keep those little air pockets open.
And then, of course, the fruit. The plums.
A whole pound of them. I mean, over 500 grams. The basics are raisins, sultanas, currants. But the really good ones have prunes, candied peel, maybe even some chopped apple for texture.
And it's all held together with the final, non-negotiable ingredient.
The alcohol.
Sherry.
The brandy or sherry.
You need it. You soak the fruit in it, preferably overnight, to plump it all up. And that is just the very first step in what is a truly astonishing time commitment.
Right. That brandy soak is just the start. Let's talk about the cooking process, because this is not your standard 45-minute cake bake.
Not even close. Prepare for a bit of culture shock here. The method is simple enough. You put your covered pudding basin on a rack in a big pot, fill it with boiling water halfway up the side.
And then you just wait.
And you wait.
For how long? Because the recipes we saw were all over the place. Some said 3 hours.
3 hours is the absolute bare minimum, and only for a small pudding. Most modern recipes will say 4 hours, but the old ones, the really traditional 1827 recipes,
What do they say?
7 or even 8 hours.
8 hours of continuous steaming? That sounds like an entire workday.
It is an entire dedicated Saturday, basically, but it's so critical.
Why? What is happening in there for 8 hours? Two things. First, the pudding is so dense that it just takes that long for the steam to penetrate and cook it all the way through.
Okay, that makes sense.
But second, and this is the real secret to the flavor, that long, slow, gentle heat caramelizes all the sugars. The sugar in the fruit, the molasses, the treacle.
So that dark, rich, almost black color, it's not just from the ingredients, it's from the cooking itself.
Exactly. It's a flavor development you just cannot get from baking in a dry oven.
Yeah.
But amazingly, after those 4 to 8 hours are up, you're still not done.
No, not by a long shot, because then comes the real secret weapon of Christmas pudding.
The aging.
Right. You have to let it mature.
You do. After it cools, you recover it and you store it in a cool, dark place.
For how long? A couple of days?
A minimum of 4 weeks.
A month.
A month. Traditionally, families made it on Stir-Up Sunday, the last Sunday before Advent, and let it age right up until Christmas Day. The alcohol and sugar are perfect preservatives. It can last for over a year.
Which means if you want a proper Christmas pudding, you should have started back in November.
Or even the year before.
That is just incredible.
Here's a really important practical tip for you if you're thinking of making one. If you want to freeze it, you have to let it age for those 4 weeks first.
Why is that?
Because the freezing process completely halts that chemical maturation. The flavors won't develop in the freezer.
Good to know. And even after all that 8 hours of cooking, 4 weeks of aging, you're still not done.
Still not done. Because on the day, you have to steam it again to reheat it for another hour and a half to 3 hours until it's piping hot.
It is, without a doubt, the highest maintenance dessert I have ever heard of.
It is. But all of that labor is tied up in so much tradition and ritual.
The whole process is a ritual, really. It starts with Stir-Up Sunday.
That's right. The last Sunday before Advent is the day the whole family would gather to make the pudding.
And there was a specific way to do it.
Very specific way. The mixture was supposed to have 13 ingredients to represent Jesus and the disciples.
Yeah.
And every member of the family had to take a turn stirring the mixture.
And not just any old stir. They had to stir from east to west.
East to west, while making a wish to commemorate the journey of the wise men. It's just this wonderful, simple piece of family folklore.
And then there were the charms.
Oh, the charms, yes.
Yeah.
The tradition of baking little trinkets into the pudding itself.
Which sounds a little dangerous. I'm just imagining someone breaking a tooth on a silver coin at the Christmas table.
Ah, yes. Hopefully they were wrapped in a bit of parchment paper first. But each one meant something. A coin was for wealth, a wishbone for luck, a thimble for thrift.
A ring for marriage?
Exactly. And sometimes an anchor for safe harbor. It turned eating dessert into a sort of game of fortune-telling.
But the real show, the grand finale, is the fire.
That's the Dickensian moment. It's pure theater, but it's essential. The pudding is brought to the table while it's literally on fire.
And how do you actually do that?
It's surprisingly simple. You just gently warm a little bit of brandy in a pan, light it carefully with a long match, and pour the flaming liquid right over the top of the hot pudding.
It creates that incredible blue flame.
It does. And then for the final touch, you garnish it with a sprig of holly.
Which symbolizes the crown of thorns.
Right. Though we should add the caution we saw in the sources.
Right.
Holly berries are toxic, so that part is strictly for decoration.
And you can't serve something that rich on its own. It needs a sauce.
Always. Something like a creme anglaise, brandy butter, or a classic hard sauce.
And speaking of sauces, we found a fantastic family story about that.
Oh, this one was great. It was an anecdote about a grandmother making her famous brandy hard sauce.
Okay.
So she goes to the liquor cabinet to grab the brandy. She just grabs what she thinks is, the brandy.
But it wasn't.
It was her husband's very, very expensive cognac. We're talking Remy Martin XO.
Oh, no. That is not just brandy. That's a serious investment. She didn't use that in the sauce, did she?
She used it lavishly.
What did her husband do?
Well, initially he was horrified,
Yeah.
but then he tasted the sauce, and it was so unbelievably good that from then on he insisted she use the expensive cognac every single year.
That's amazing.
And the story ends with the confession that she was also sneaking a little bit of it into the pudding batter itself.
Of course she was. That is the perfect story for this dessert. It's rich, it's boozy, and it's built on secret family traditions. So to wrap this all up for you, we figured out that the name plum pudding is a historical quirk, an old term for any dried fruit.
We've seen the absolutely incredible labor involved. A cooking time of 4 to 8 hours, followed by at least 4 weeks of aging.
It's a dessert that demands a serious commitment of time.
And finally, we've seen how it's just steeped in ritual and folklore, from stir-up Sunday to that final dramatic flaming entrance.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the plum pudding is really a perfect microcosm of food history.
It absolutely is. It's like a time capsule. It shows how ingredients, trade, and tradition all come together. It evolved from a savory meat preservative in the Middle Ages
To this revered holiday centerpiece that you have to plan weeks or even months in advance.
And the fact that it can last for over a year really emphasizes that sense of continuity. So we want to leave you with a provocative thought. If a traditional plum pudding represents a time capsule of memory and family history, what simple annual meal in your own life do you value, not just for how it tastes, but for the sense of continuity and shared time that it represents?